Hi everyone, I am Clara, Chief Empowerment and Partnerships Officer at Marlon Security. Welcome to the Authenticity Journey, where insightful conversations inspire leadership, foster trust, and create meaningful growth. Today, we are honored to have a distinguished guest, Roger O'Brien. Roger is the president of O'Brien's Associates and a trusted leader in executive coaching, strategic consulting, and performance management. His career includes roles as a CEO, investor, and turnaround specialist, helping businesses navigate growth, transformation, and leadership challenges. He has worked with high-tech firms, played a key role in the rise of Sun Microsystems, and advised on multi-million-dollar exits. Beyond business, Roger is a dedicated mentor, enjoys playing tennis, and is a U.S. Army veteran. Roger, welcome to the Authenticity Journey. Tell us more about your path, your background, and what experiences have shaped you into this journey.
And life is a journey. I got tired listening to my introduction. I'm saying, who is that guy? But life is a journey. I started my career as an engineer, actually. And it's ironic because most of my work as a coach now is getting inside people's heads, their motivation, their self-awareness, that type of thing. That's quite a transformation because most engineers aren't particularly high on EQ, etc. But I must have changed in the course of my work experiences over the years. I became interested in business and left my engineering employer, got an MBA, and then began in my business career, initially as in finance and later in operations and strategy and then general management. Some years ago, I left big corporate America and transitioned to small business management, which I like much better because you can look around the building and see everybody that works for you and touch them easily and sit down with them easily, as opposed to working with committees in big corporate America.
Much more approach.
Personal approach, able to develop more meaningful relationships and engagement with employees in a smaller company. Ultimately, I moved to be an independent general management consultant, doing work mostly for small and mid-sized businesses, although some large corporations continuing, in strategic planning, business process improvement, that's operational expertise. And I don't know why, but in the last 10 years, I've found 80% of my work and the demand for my skills comes from leaders and people who report to business leaders to improve their leadership performance. So currently, as I said, about 80% of my work is leadership consulting.
Wow, that's an amazing, impressive journey.
Well, it's a different side of the brain because as an engineer, you know, it was black and white and crack the code and that kind of thing. Now it's none of that, and it's all about people and what motivates them and their sense of self-awareness.
Wow, that's impressive. And you went from doing one thing to something completely different.
It's like a different person.
It's a different person, yes.
I discovered a different person, or maybe
your journey has shaped you.
I discovered another side of me that I happen to enjoy more.
Well, that's beautiful and impressive, and it's a reminder that we can shape into anything. Anything can change as we move through our human experiences.
I agree.
And we also have here Marlon Bermudez, founder and VCISO at Marlon Security. Marlon is a seasoned cybersecurity expert with 2 decades of experience helping organizations strengthen their security and resilience. Beyond cybersecurity, Marlon is a thought leader and advocate for digital trust, and a firm believer in the power of authenticity in leadership. Marlon, welcome to the Authenticity Journey. As a VCISO, you've helped bridge the worlds of cybersecurity and leadership every day. What role does authenticity play in your space?
When it comes to cybersecurity and leadership, one of the most important things, and I would say the currency of both businesses, is trust. You're not really able to generate or build trust with leadership on any organization, whether it's small or larger business, unless you're able to have authentic conversations, you're able to be just your true self and stick to the core values, which is the most important thing. If they are not able to trust you, and that comes with reliability and a lot of other things, if they're not able to determine that you have a lot of integrity, then when you're speaking with them and you're not having authentic conversations, you're not able to build trust at that level. So from that perspective, authentic conversations, real honest conversations with them is what helps build
Trust.
is what helps build trust. When I'm working with my clients, the most important thing that's important to them is how much cybersecurity is enough. What do we need to do? And at the leadership level, they care about organizational culture for the most part. One important thing is cybersecurity. There is a change that needs to be enacted in the organization, but you cannot do that too fast. So you have to do that very carefully, very organically as well. So being able to incorporate that slowly in the organization while having just real conversation as to what the organization needs, rather than just bombarding with things, is part of what's helping build the trust with those organizations.
Very nice. Well, authenticity is the foundation of, creating a business that's powerful and efficient. I have a few questions for Roger, our special guest.
Fire away.
How do authentic conversations help organizations identify growth and opportunities while working and functioning efficiently?
Well, what I've found in my work, and one reason a couple of years ago I started emphasizing authentic conversations in company cultures, my client cultures, is because I saw many, if not most organizations, not able to capture or enable employees to share cost-cutting ideas, new product opportunities, new services opportunities for the company, because they weren't, well, there's a number of reasons, but they weren't encouraged to offer those ideas. What happens is people get tired. They're busy. They offer an idea for a new product, let's say, to their management. And if management isn't receptive and not welcoming of authentic conversations, including constructive criticism of how things are operating, people sense that right away, and they fear that they're jeopardizing their own job by irritating management.
Wow.
But management shouldn't look at pushback and ideas that they didn't come up with. They shouldn't look at that as an irritation. They should welcome it and encourage it, and they don't. So I've led a number of workshops, and in my individual leadership coaching, emphasize the importance of authentic conversations. I talk about why people hesitate, what's the hesitation to have it, either to initiate an authentic conversation or to receive it graciously and take it for what it is. And it's made a difference in a number of organizations I've worked with.
Wow.
Authentic conversations remind me of a book that I read a while back that talks about radical transparency and how that's leveraging organizations, and some do it more successfully than others, and how some employees don't like that culture and sometimes management doesn't like that culture either. Have you seen any organizations implement that specific aspect of radical transparency, or is that done a little bit in a different approach?
I can't say I've heard that term, but I know what it must mean, radical transparency. It definitely falls on the authentic conversations topic. People deep down have to be comfortable with constructive criticism. They can't view it as a personal attack. They should welcome it, because that's where wonderful ideas come from for doing things better. But they don't. And you commented on the importance of trust in relationships. If I'm your supervisor and I'm talking to you, and you have an idea, and I'm making faces and body language because, well, we tried that 3 years ago and it's not going to work, you're going to be discouraged from ever bringing anything else to me. The other element that is preventing trust is many leaders at the highest levels talk at people, not with people. And so, just speaking to some elements of my own work, I spend a lot of time on improving their self-awareness, how they're coming off to people, and encourage them, as I said before, to talk with people, not at them. And what does that mean? It means it's a ping pong, right? I'm not doing all the talking. I'll say something to you. I think we ought to achieve this goal over the coming months. What do you think? You'll talk to me. I help people realize that I'm really listening by asking clarifying questions.
Do you, as a coach working side by side with organizations, leaders, do you find that having an authentic approach within yourself as you approach them and coaching them helps them step down? And
it does. Just like kindness breeds kindness.
Yes.
And if they've never had a role model for what is a truly engaged conversation, the right eye contact, effective listening, clarifying questions being asked, that type of thing, if they've never really experienced that, they see the power of it when we do it. And some people are stuck in their ways, but most will try to emulate that because they feel how effective it was for them.
Absolutely.
When they were treated that way. And so that increases trust, it increases morale in the organization.
And that's such a powerful approach because it starts with you, right? As a coach who's working with those leaders side by side, you're also approaching them as your authentic self at all times, which allows them to become vulnerable and authentic as well without fear.
You have to take the first step. And so leaders and organizations that have a problem with authentic conversations happening often enough, they have to take the first step to model the behavior they want from their people.
That's fair.
And that means even tough conversations, tough love, like, Claire, I think you could have done a better job on that project last month. And, in hindsight, I realize I'm a Monday morning quarterback here, but in hindsight, you might have thought about doing this, that, the next time around. Well, a lot of people have great difficulty bringing that to someone's attention because they like them, they don't want to offend them, but it's a gift. I just gave you a gift.
Yes, absolutely.
And the recipient, you in this example, should listen intently and realize it as a gift. But many people are just too thin-skinned to take advantage of all of the assets around them.
And I think when it comes to everything in life, if you're open to listen, you're open to learn, you're open to grow. So I think bringing that to leaders, that listening is the most wise action they can do. It is very powerful because that's where change starts. And I understand because as humans, sometimes we don't want to listen, right? We believe that whatever we're doing is effective and we want to continue to continue to move with the same approach, the same process.
Yep.
But when we listen, something changes, right? There's like this light bulb. Oh, wait a minute.
Well, two things happen when you listen. You learn things and you show respect. And so I used to coach business-to-business salespeople. I do less so now on how to be more successful in winning business. And, I don't know what it is about the sales profession, but many salespeople, sophisticated salespeople, feel that they're not doing it right unless they're doing all the talking. They just talk you to death. Well, here's what we can do. Here's what we've done. You should consider this, yak. And I tell them you can't learn anything when you're doing all the talking. So you've got to measure it out.
On the sales side, you can't really help your client if you don't know who they are, what they expect, what is it that they need.
What are their unmet needs?
Correct.
What have they tried that didn't work? I mean, that's pretty fundamental, but something about human behavior makes many salespeople think they have to talk them to death to win the contract. It's crazy.
And that's when they fail. right?
They do.
They fail. They may think they're winning, but at some point they will realize they're failing, because you may win a client over and over again for a few times, but you can't really remain winning at that point, because it gets, if I'm the client, I would get tired. I would expect more of a personable approach. I connect with people who are willing to connect with me, who are open to understand what is it that I need, what is it that I want.
It's a value system, and really in culture change in organizations where I spend a lot of time, one block at a time, one leader at a time, one employee at a time, because you can't wave your pixie dust at the organization and they suddenly have a new culture. I spend a lot of time trying to get them to recognize what are common values that they have. And it really is deep. It's not the mission statement that you see when you walk in a lobby and we believe in this, we believe in that. It's what people do when no one's watching. That's the culture. And you have to walk around and spend a lot of time with them, and then you suddenly figure out what's missing. And then you have to convince your client, often the CEO or the president, of what's missing. You have to present your rationale and your evidence. And then you can get to work.
And why do you think that organizations are lacking authenticity?
It's because people are afraid. They don't want to hurt someone's feelings by saying, I think you could have done this a bit better and I'd like to help next time. Asking for a raise. So let's say, for example, we have a terrifically performing employee who has somehow been ignored by HR and the promotion system. And they're really kind of ticked off. And they'll talk with me, for example, and I'll say, well, don't be ticked off. Suddenly become a less desirable employee if you walk around with an attitude. Develop a rationale. Do bullet points in your head about what you've done, what you've accomplished, how committed you are to the organization, and present that to your boss. But oftentimes they won't do that because fear of rejection.
Yes.
That holds back a lot of salespeople. We're talking sales now. This individual in my example is selling themselves. Fear of rejection. I tried it last year and it fell flat in its face. I'm not going to do it again. It was embarrassing. This boss doesn't listen. He just gives orders. There's lots of reasons. So both pieces have to play together. One has to have the confidence to present their case, and the other has to have the respect to listen.
Yes, and that makes sense. And a lot of times leaders in an organization, they expect to trust their employees and build a relationship, but at the same time, they're not allowing them to be their authentic selves. So they're so limited. How do you expect to build an organization there that it's healthy, that you're able to connect, that they're able to listen to you, but you're not allowing them to be authentic?
True. Going back to the trust factor, which is so huge in relationships, personal and business. I have one particular client where I've had a lot of trouble with leaders, maybe vice presidents, for example, hesitating to delegate things that they should delegate to their staff. Now, what's the negative there? Well, it isn't just that the VP ends up with too much work, 70, 80-hour weeks, that they shouldn't need to have. They should hand it to qualified people. But they're people, what are they thinking? You don't trust me enough to give me that. You don't trust me. And it's a lose-lose. It's a lose-lose. So I've been working on the underlying reasons why certain of my clients do not delegate. I hear things like, well, by the time I teach them how to do it, I could do it myself, right? That's a false scenario. Or they just haven't invested the training in their people and they know they can't do it. So they're kicking the can down the road and they'll be sitting there 10 years from now still doing a job they should have handed to their employee. So it's all about self-awareness, authenticity, and recognizing how someone will react to you and how trust might be impacted up or down by how your connection with them in work. I think that's true of private relationships too, personal.
Yes, and building trust, I think it's very significant when you're building a business.
I think building trust is a very personal endeavor. Also, with authenticity. I think that it starts with ourselves first, because sometimes we want to have authentic conversations with others, but if we're not being authentic with ourselves, if we're lying to ourselves, then it becomes complicated.
Yeah.
Because how can we have an honest conversation with somebody else when we might say, oh, I really want to accomplish that, but we're not really putting in the effort?
That's the self-awareness thing. And for some people, it needs therapy. For some people, they just need to understand they have to invest time in introspection, self-introspection, and, seek out people who know you well and care about you and say, hey, what do you think of this? And listen to the feedback.
Yes. Again, it goes back to listening, right?
Yeah.
It goes back. I'm always thinking that as humans, we want change, and we identify that certain things may need change, and we are willing to change, to see the change, but we are unwilling to change ourselves. And nothing.
We don't think we need change.
We don't think we need change. So, and I can see that as you're coaching a leader, I'm sure you may find yourself in a conversation dealing with a leader who knows there needs to be a level of change in the organization, but they're willing to do whatever it is that they have to do to change, but they are not really looking within themselves and understanding that they're not willing to change themselves, and nothing changes and it remains the same.
Clara, there's a phrase, only babies like change.
Yeah, we are unwilling to change at all times, and
it's uncomfortable. I don't know. I've always liked change. By the time I was 12, I had lived or visited every state in the continental U.S. My dad worked for Pepsi-Cola and had to visit bottlers all over the country, and we moved and vacationed, and by age 12, I'd been everywhere except Alaska. So that made me used to change, all the relocations and everything else. And I do have my routines, as my lovely wife would tell you, but I am stimulated by change. And that's one reason I'm in my current coaching work. It's a new client, every month. It's a new issue, although they're always the same issues, but in a different context, because it's a different company or a different client and set of responsibilities that they have with their employer. And I like that change. I don't like my work to be predictable. I like my home life to be predictable.
And the truth is, nothing changes if nothing changes.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things that change reminds me of, to me, change is synonymous with improvement opportunities. Because every day when we wake up, we have the opportunity to improve, to grow, to do something better, something to innovate. Whether it's ourselves, our business, our relationships, we can always do something better.
Yep.
Some people like to change their circumstances, like you mentioned earlier, but not necessarily themselves.
Willing to change them.
So what happens then is that things around you are changing, but you're not changing. So things will tend to repeat themselves later on, unless you're improving. There is the concept of operating system, but unless you're improving how you carry yourself at the personal level, which automatically translates to the business level. In the past, throughout my career, I've performed performance reviews. So there have been times where I've interviewed employees in previous roles. In a few quarters in a row, there were improvement opportunities. The opportunities were there quarter after quarter, but the improvement never took place. So that becomes a little bit of a challenge because the authenticity with themselves was not there. They didn't see or could understand that there was an improvement opportunity that they needed to change. And
even though you advised them of that.
Correct. from EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System, I'm a big fan of that. There is the concept of the right people in the right seat. So that's when you have to basically organize and make sure that the right people are filling the right positions in the company, and sometimes you have to replace, individuals at all different levels of the organization.
You do.
And you are your operating system. If you think about ourselves as humans, or our bodies, or the brain, the machine, we are a machine. So you are your operating system. So I think embracing change is also allowing yourself to reconstruct that operating system.
Yeah.
Whatever it is that you built over the years,
You're
you have
rewiring
to.
some aspect or all of it.
Absolutely.
Oftentimes. My wife and business partner has a saying, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always gotten. And it's true. If you're happy with what you've gotten, no change. But if you're not, don't expect to wake up some morning and suddenly it's all good. You have to initiate it. It takes courage.
It takes
Because there's potential for failure in change.
Yes, you have to be willing to feel discomfort, right?
Yeah.
Because it's uncomfortable at all times.
Yeah.
Every step of the way as you're changing everything, whatever it is that the ideas you have about yourself, the titles you have, the way you see yourself, that hurts. Because it's peeling off the layers that it's been built in you over the course of your life. So it's a painful process, but the most beautiful process we can go through in life as humans.
To me, I've accomplished a few things in my career, but I would say the thing that I'm proud the most, it's not what I might have done with my career, with my clients, or the book, or anything like that. It's actually my core values. I would say that's the most important thing that I'm the most proud of. The core values that I've created for myself, more that I strictly align with them. For example, integrity. That's one of the core values that we have, is actually inspire. I stands for integrity. A while back, someone mentioned to me that I would have to bend my integrity to be successful in business. My answer was, then I'd rather not go into business if that's the route that it's going to take me. But it's just, in my opinion, everything is about alignment. You build and attract whatever comes around your core values, whatever your real essence is. And if you want to build something that's, in my opinion, trustworthy, integrity has to be at the forefront of everything. But it's more about the core values. Normally you hear that about organizations, but at the end of the day, it also comes down to all the different layers of the organization. You have to align the core values that not only the company has, but the individuals as well, employees. When there is a misalignment, then you end up seeing sometimes unfortunate things happen, sometimes things just don't work out.
The thing is, you have to be practical as well. Not everyone who could be a very desirable client will necessarily have the same standards of integrity that you have, and or anyone with the highest standards of integrity, because not everybody's that way, and you can't turn your back on them, because you could do a lot of good for their organizations. And your values, depending on how you structure your relationship with your clients, you could protect your values from having to be compromised. And because, think about if you were a politician. I mean, we're not politicians for good reasons, but I'm just saying how much compromise they have to make of what really are their core values. They wouldn't survive, because it's constant compromise. And in business, there's compromise all the time, whether it's terms and conditions, or who is on the job. Is it you or someone you've trained? There's always compromise. You have to be willing to compromise, be practical. Otherwise, I think you just can't get anywhere, but you can protect your values. You must, because at the end of the day, if you don't have that, what do you have?
And I like the level of standards. That's a good way of framing it.
Yeah.
That way there is always a threshold.
I think it's important to understand that sometimes you have to also let go of clients or or business.
Oh yeah, I've done that.
It's hard, right? Because none of us we don't want to lose a client or a deal, but sometimes we have to. We have to let go, and
Yeah, I think the goal we all have is to do our best work in our profession. And it's something we're passionate about and enjoy. And ideally, you like it so much, you do it without a paycheck, just because you like the process. If we were independently wealthy, you would do it. I would. I would do it for free, but don't tell my clients.
absolutely.
But that's what we all seek out. You can't always find that. But when you do, you know you're in the right profession with the right clients.
What are some of the blind spots that you identify in leaders in their path? Because as a coach, you working side by side, I'm sure you're able to identify.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what I look for in leaders. Obviously willing to be authentic and encourage authentic conversations among their team and their bosses. Good planning and communication skills, conflict resolution skills, coordination skills are needed in leaders because they're always trying to put different departments together to accomplish a common goal. Delegation is the blind spot I see all the time. Ineffective delegation. We talked about that a few minutes ago. And developing their people. Those 6 things are what I look for in leaders, and I very quickly try to narrow down where they feel they need to improve, or whether their bosses probably have told me where they need to improve. Or I sense it by talking with them about their day-to-day work, issues they've had, things that haven't gotten accomplished, and I can figure out what might be missing.
Do you find them open to?
I have to build up to it, and this is where the politician comes in. You have to build up to it. First of all, well, it would be the same in your work. You have to build a trust. If you can't get into the tough love until the trust is there. They've got to know that I only care about their becoming their best selves. I'm not in a competition with them. I'm an asset in their pocket, and I only want the best. Once you think, it usually takes a couple of 1-hour Zooms to get through that with a new client. And then once I get there, I usually ask them, what would you like to get better at doing? And they'll tell me. It might be a completely different list than the one I've got in my mind.
Right.
And I'll ask, well, is this from your own self-observation and analysis, or is this what your boss told you, that you need to improve on these things? I'll hear back a combination of things. And if that doesn't totally align with what I suspect and know they need help with, we'll start to have the diplomatic conversation. Well, show me your monthly calendar of meetings and tasks. And so they'll send me the Outlook calendar. And I'll say, why couldn't you send Sally to this meeting instead of you, or Joe to this meeting? Or why couldn't you have given that task to Jeff because he's been with the company even longer than you? And I'll start to pick apart the usually delegation issues, trust and delegation.
Trust.
So I would say delegation is the biggest blind spot. The lack of, the hesitance to delegate, and the lack of willingness to get to the root cause. Insecurity, desire for power and control, not wanting to take the time to teach. I could do it quicker myself than I could teach you, and all those blind spots come up.
What about accountability or ownership? How often does that show up in that self-awareness list that they're coming up with?
Their own accountability or their people's accountability? Holding their people accountable?
Both.
Both, okay. Well, that is the ultimate authentic conversation. You didn't do what I asked. You committed to do it. You had all the tools, all the knowledge, all the time, but it didn't happen. Can you tell me why? What got in the way? How can we avoid this in the future? That's an important authentic conversation following up on accountability. But my employee could initiate that too. Roger, I know I missed the deadline. I'm sorry. Here's what happened. That's a tough, authentic conversation for the employee to initiate. People have to be willing to do that. You don't learn anything about each other. You don't improve the business if you walk around the hallway like that.
Blind. If you're blind, you barely know what's happening around you and your surroundings.
Not only like that, but where you're not talking. I call that checking the box in life. Not really engaging in life, but just checking the box. I got to get from here to here. I got to meet with that person, hear what they have to say. I have to go over here and conduct a meeting. You're not feeling it. You're not engaged. You're just checking the box.
I agree. When you're walking blind without, missing the point, you're unable to see what's happening. You're unable to know your organization. You're unable to build trust or a relationship with the ones you work with every single day. And it starts with you. And if you're not willing to experience the entire organization, which includes your employees and everyone else who's involved, and have a relationship of trust, then you're really not willing to build an organization that is powerful and successful.
And you're not modeling the culture you want everybody to feel. It drives me crazy when I hear from business owners, I don't like the culture here because people don't do this, that. And then after, a month of working with that business owner, well, that's what they do. People are just doing what the boss does. He created the monster. Self-awareness.
One of the biggest things for me is passion, and just being extremely passionate about whatever you do. Because if you're working for a company, then you're an employee of that company. So you have to be really passionate about your role in that company, whatever meaningful work you're doing. Mm-hmm. So you really should be really passionate about that, or figure out a growth opportunity to move to another role, maybe another department.
You have to love what you do, and that's what's missing in a lot of organizations. Like, employees are not in love with their jobs. They don't love what they do because they're unable to become their own selves, to express themselves in an authentic way. They fear. They walk with fear. They're preventing themselves from growing or sharing experiences or even ideas that will benefit the organization. So you find an employee that's not satisfied with their jobs, and then you can't really trust them. They're not building anything. They're not productive. They're just drowning and working paycheck to paycheck, just fighting to keep the job, but not really building the organization.
And good leaders should have skills to detect that when a person isn't really, passionate's a strong word, but really liking their role, suited for their role, calls on all their natural skill sets. But if you can be good at doing something, but still not love it. And that's important to determine too. So going back to your comment on passion, or different levels of passion for a job. I think most people aren't passionate about their jobs, but they can still like their jobs very much. You're never going to get the most out of your employee if they don't have a healthy love of their job.
It needs to be, you only grow in a healthy environment. So your job needs to be in a healthy environment.
Yep. Agree.
One of the things that I really enjoy having conversations the most about when I go to networking events and just getting to know people out there, it's more on business operations and leadership. Not so much about cyber or different things, but I really enjoy how are they operating. And specifically with entrepreneurs, I'm always very curious as to what's their journey, how do they get started, why did they get started?
Yeah, what gave them their idea?
Yeah, and are they currently passionate about what they're doing? What challenges are they facing? How can they fix it? And what resources are they utilizing for that? I've met business owners that chose a different business just because it was the path of least resistance. I'm not going to say that they hate it, but they're not in love with what they're doing. So the passion is not there when they wake up every day in the morning. So to some degree, just my opinion, the level of the outcome, it's more at that level about the money and about survival rather than pursuing their innate passion or just feeling fulfilled, which might have a larger outcome. I've also seen individuals who have a different path for a little bit and they're building something else in the meanwhile, which is what a lot of incubator communities do. And I've seen that in Connecticut, New York, and other places too. So incubator communities are really, really helpful for that. And to me, just seeing a very powerful community of a lot of business owners with the same level of energy, just driving to be better, driving to promote change in their community, in their own lives and others, has been very powerful.
And the story behind it, right? I know a successful brand, a successful business has a story behind it. That's what gives it the boost of energy and
The thing about entrepreneurs, and I have to tell you, I've coached probably 600 entrepreneurs over the years, more than half of them pro bono, as my wife and I are doing with 1909 entrepreneurs. To be an entrepreneur, you got to be a risk taker. You have to have a strong belief and passion for your vision. You have to be very self-reliant to last as an entrepreneur. But that passion can also blind you, because I can't tell you how many company founders at the early stage I've worked with that are so convinced about what their product is needed by what target market. And you know, they're so self-reliant and not used to taking advice, especially rational opinion that would tend to rain on their parade about what they think is the market target fit. And that can blind them because they're so bought into their vision. It's like me telling you your firstborn child is ugly.
I love that. I love that, because what you're saying is that too much attachment to one specific passion or to one idea is limiting.
It closes you off to authentic conversation.
So instead of growing, they become limited.
Yeah.
Because this is my passion, this is how I believe it should be done, and I'm not changing.
Yeah, but they wouldn't have become entrepreneurs unless they were passionate about their vision.
That's a great point.
So it's a yin and yang. It's kind of opposing forces. And so what you want to try to do when you see good promise in their business vision and in themselves as a business owner, an operator, what you have to try to do is get them to just let go a bit and be open on a slightly altered vision. Consider it. Here's why. Here's the rationale. And by all means, take the time to go out and get the voice of the customer. Because what your beautiful baby may not appear beautiful to your target market. You've got to know. You can't just say, well, how could they not love this baby? My wife and I have, in our mentoring work at 1909 in particular, we found a lot of people are hesitant to consider other things with the voice of the customer. So the voice of the customer is getting an authentic conversation to the business owner in this analogy.
And I think having a business or being an entrepreneur is about value delivery, part of the conversation that we were having earlier. But it's about value delivery, not how much money can I make or how much money can the business make. It's more of how much value can we deliver to the client. Because the bigger the value, the bigger the problems that we're solving, the more success there is for everybody involved, but specifically for the client.
And the client will tell you if they didn't get sufficient value for what they paid. You can count on that. That's the voice of the customer. By the way, if you don't know what 1909 is, it's a business startup incubator in West Palm Beach, Florida, that has been terrifically successful over the past 10 years, giving entrepreneurs a head start.
Well, I'm curious. I know you've mentioned that you shifted careers, right? When did you realize that it was time for something new, that it was time to change? Because that was a big shift, a big change in your life.
Let me think about that, Clara. Um, I wasn't enjoying crunching numbers all day. I was a CFO, and I just lost interest at that point in my financial career. And oddly enough, and this is the mindset change, I started wanting to spend more time on people issues, like organizational development, and well, obviously that's why I'm in coaching now. When did that happen? Probably in my early 40s. And I don't know, it's almost like my brain adopted a different side than it was before. I don't know why that works that way, but it did with me. So that's a pretty fundamental shift, numbers versus people, black and white versus shades of gray.
That's why I was curious, because it's such a
I'm still trying to figure it out.
different shift, but
Yeah, that's a shift.
There is the passion for leadership that I sense in you since we met, essentially. And I think that's very powerful, and that automatically brings you towards people in general, towards a career.
Leadership is a people business.
If you could give yourself a piece of advice, and you could send this message to Roger 20
Back to
years
my
ago.
younger self.
Yes, 20 years ago. What would you say?
Take more chances. Don't be so conservative.
risk more.
Risk more. Yeah, because I grew up in a pretty conservative household, and nobody was really a risk taker. Nobody was a salesperson on commission, which is risk taking. But I think I'd probably stretch out a little bit more if I gave younger Roger that advice.
So let's be courageous, not fear. Make it a possibility.
Yeah, but if it keeps you up all night being courageous, no, you gotta find the middle ground. You gotta find the middle ground.
I think a boost of courage can keep us up all night at times, right? It's just that deep desire of creating something new, of experiencing something new, and it's naturally in there as humans. But of course, there needs to be a balance.
Yep.
Yes.
Agreed.
But what advice do you normally give to leaders when it comes to incorporating authentic conversations or authenticity in general in the organizational culture?
You have to model it. If people see the head of the business doing it, and if that head of business has enough contact with people so that they can see and model his or her behavior, it will eventually flow down. But I think not just modeling, they have to say in words, we want to be like this, and here are the benefits to being like this. Let's not shy away from difficult conversations.
I think sometimes a little bit of authentic conversations, part of the challenge might be that there needs to be, at least in what I've seen in my opinion, a little bit of vulnerability, which reminds me of a book that I read by Brené Brown. And the challenge is that sometimes leaders or just managers in general, they don't want to appear to be weak, but you don't necessarily have to do that in business. You could be vulnerable in a way that you're just being human. You're just opening a little bit of space where you can connect with anybody that reports to you and be able to build that safe space to promote direct communication.
And vulnerability, I think it's the most powerful tool we hold as humans, because when we become vulnerable, we make deeper connections, because we also allow others to become their own selves and to be vulnerable, to show up as they are without fear, without insecurities. So I think vulnerability is a very powerful tool, and I am sure as your authentic self, you show up as being vulnerable and being real with the leaders you work with.
I try to model what I want them to do. I hope I'm successful.
I'm sure you are.
One can only hope.
I'm sure you are, and you play a huge role in shaping the culture of their organization.
It's very satisfying when you see it working. It's not very satisfying when you see it not working, and you have to remind yourself you don't have control over all the switches at all. It's the bosses.
What do you do when you feel that it's not working? Like, what's your first approach?
Authentic conversation with my client, the CEO or president, I just say, do you and your team feel you're getting what you need from me? If not, how could I adjust the approach?
Have you ever let go of a client
Oh, yes.
that,
Actually, it was a client my wife and I were mutually working with.
oh wow,
And they didn't exhibit the values that you talked about 20 minutes ago.
the core values? Yes.
And shady, disappointing, very disappointing, because it started out great. You get to know people.
But I'm sure yours was probably your best decision, and
Oh, yeah.
what you learned from it.
I wouldn't have been able to head it off at the pass because, you have to work with people before you know how they operate. There's no litmus test at the beginning to save you time. You just have to start working with them. I mean, sure, you could ask for references. Others could go on Glassdoor, see what employees have said, who's left. But I rarely do that work, that kind of research. I just try to trust my gut.
And what you do is so beautiful and so fundamental in an organization, because as humans, we need someone that will point the blind spots, that will let you know, hey, you need to change, that's not going right. So that's extremely necessary.
I think acceptance of coaches, business and leadership coaches, has increased tremendously in the United States culture, business culture, over the past 10, 20 years. 30 years ago, if a CEO said they had a coach, it'd be like saying, I'm seeing a psychologist every night. They kind of look at you and say, are you that screwed up? But now there are very few business leaders of any importance that I know who don't have a coach. They might not be seeing them once a week, as I do with my clients. It might be once a month, check-ins. But because the coach represents a safe place to open your kimono and express all your fears and hear hopefully good advice, because it isn't going to go anywhere unless they ask me to share it with some of their direct reports, which they do occasionally. And that's a precious gift for somebody at the top. It's always said it's lonely at the top, and that's because the CEO, they've got their board of directors and they've got their spouse or significant other to talk to, but that's often about it, because you can't have leakages, especially if you're a publicly held company. So, but a coach, a vetted coach, it's like gold to help them continue to grow and deal with difficult circumstances.
And it's necessary, because the change starts within ourselves. And that's the work you do, working side by side with them. It's a little bit similar to psychology, because you're there side by side.
I'm a practical psychologist.
Going through
not
that.
A clinical psychologist.
I know, but going through that process of change, which is painful, making tough decisions.
And it's a negotiation too with the client. They may say, I've had this with my most significant CEO client currently. I'll say, I really think you ought to do X, Y, Z, and this, I'm willing to bet this is the result you would get. And they'll think about it, and I don't know, I don't think so. And so we agree to disagree. You can't win them all. But if I heard that 5 times in a row out of 6 recommendations I gave them, I'd be concerned that I have any credibility with the client. But that doesn't happen.
When you're first starting to engage with a client who is in a leadership role, ideally or usually, what do you see as their perception of the value that you're going to bring to them as part of the experience?
Sometimes they just want a safe person to complain to about their problems. They're not necessarily looking for advice or change. I think there's some element of that in almost every client I've had. It's a safe place to vent.
To vent.
I hate this place. I'm sick of working at this company. and then it blows away. Sometimes it's been pointed out to them, or they've recognized on their own that they have the deficiency in some of the things we talked about: delegation, conflict resolution, something like that.
Do you feel that they get to the point, when they get to the point of actually working with a coach, it's when they're seeking for some level of emotional support because of how overwhelming it has become?
Yes,
to
very
lead.
much so with my principal client right now. I think it's become emotional support, and I'm happy to give it.
My closing question would be more on what advice would you give entrepreneurs, who is basically the younger generation of future leaders, since they're starting to build their careers, their companies, and their future, basically. What's the most important advice that you would give them if you could basically be face-to-face with them?
Yeah, be open-minded, be willing to take advice. Don't be overly passionate about your vision. It will likely change several times between now and 5 years as you move forward. That's the most important thing. I think entrepreneurs can be their own worst enemies by not listening to good advice.
I like what you said earlier about passion and how that could blind people. It automatically reminded me of this movie about educated wishes. So now I'm adding educated passion to my list, because you need to have passion, but you need to make that on educated decisions too. Specifically when you're being an entrepreneur and you need to put all this risk universe and risk calculations in your head and not be blinded by the shiny goal at the end of the tunnel.
And it's very interesting too, because we talk a lot about passion, right? In today's world, we talk about passion in so many levels, but we don't really realize that too much passion to the extreme, can be harmful and not really beneficial.
There's a good phrase in life: everything in moderation.
Yeah.
Don't drink too much, don't exercise too much, don't be too passionate all the time. Moderation. The way to go.
Well, this has been an amazing, productive,
I've enjoyed the
enhancing
conversation.
And I think, again, it reminds me of when I met you and Kim. You both are very authentic, real people.
Good. We're happy to
And that's what stands out to us a lot. So you both have become friends that we truly love and appreciate. So I can see how amazing you are as a coach, just as you are as a person.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for being here with us.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Clara and Marlon.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you, everyone.